My name is Jenny Tebbit. I'm from Whakatane in the Bay of Plenty, and I live there currently, but I've been over in Australia recently working, and I'm currently at Hopi Beach.
I'm Lucy, and this is Zachary, and we live in the UK.
So I am Agnes, and originally I am from Belgium, and currently I'm living in France, in the northern part of France, a very beautiful region.
I went to work in Australia for 6 weeks, and I've ended up having to come home early. Partly, I actually became unwell over there, and ended up being tested for coronavirus and having 5 days isolation. Fortunately for me, the test actually came out negative, but they did give me a chest X-ray, and I had bronchitis. But interestingly enough, I had every symptom of coronavirus, but was actually very relieved that the test was negative. But I have had to come back early, and I flew in at 5 o'clock on Wednesday evening into Auckland, which was just before the lockdown. I managed to get a flight from Auckland to Rotorua at 7:30, and my husband left the car at the airport for me, and he also set up our caravan at a Hopi Beach, so that I could drive straight there and self-isolate. I sort of anticipated that this was coming. It was pretty evident from what was going on overseas and all the lack of things happening in Australia, that things were going to change. And I started having a conversation with my daughter because my work, I run courses all around New Zealand and Australia. I fly a lot, and they're face-to-face courses, and I work at schools. So what we've done is I've actually set up Zoom conferencing, and I plan to run webinars in place of the face-to-face seminars. So I've luckily got 4 weeks while we're in lockdown to get all these things together. And I did email all the schools and let them know that we're going to need new professional development ways because of our situation, and that a lot of people are now thinking it's a good time to study because it actually gives them something to do. So I am expecting that I'm going to be changing the way that I work, but that I will be able to continue.
We work from home. We've been able to work from home for a long time anyway, so we started doing that full time quite a few weeks ago, sort of when this started to begin within the UK, and now we are on a bit of a lockdown, so we are forced to continue to work from home. So not a lot has changed in that regard, but because we no longer have childcare, it's a bit of a different game balancing childcare and doing our full-time working hours as well.
So the current situation here in France, we are in lockdown already for quite a while. Personally, I went into lockdown really voluntarily and then obligatory. So it means that today is my 18th day that I'm in lockdown. I'm living on my own. I'm living alone with a cat and a dog. And it means, yes, I have been alone for 18 days. And that means really alone. I'm living in a very small village in very rural France. There is no activity outside. It is very, very quiet. And so that is the situation. It's also very strict here. So at the moment, if you need to fill in a form when you go out. You can only go out for 1 hour a day alone. You cannot speak to people. And you can only go out in 1 kilometer radius of your home. So before, I love the forest, I love trees, and there are beautiful forests here. So before, every day I took my dog out and went walking in the forest. I can't do that anymore. So I take the dog out, go for a walk along the roads, and that's it. So it's quite a peculiar situation. So that's that. That is the situation, and it will go on. They have announced now that the lockdown will continue for at least until the 15th of April, and probably until May.
Did actually find it quite scary being in Australia and actually being in that position. When I became unwell, I sort of lost my voice to start with, and when I got more symptoms, and I was actually sort of sent home from school, and I realised that I needed to find a doctor. The first thing that was actually quite scary was that it was pretty evident quickly that no doctor actually wanted to see you, and I was asked to ring the health line. The Healthline actually wanted to send an ambulance. And I said, look, I don't need an ambulance, I'll drive down. And when I went down to the hospital, they immediately gave you a mask, they gave you sanitizer, and then told you, can you go outside and wait, and someone will come and meet you there. And then they took you round the building into a self-isolating room. So you went in the back door to the hospital, basically, and it was, you were right in a hospital room. And it was a really surreal feeling. And everybody who actually came in, was dressed up with the what is it, EPEs, I think, uh, is it called? And that was, you actually felt like you were somebody that nobody could touch, which was really scary. And then I was also asked to self-isolate until I had a swab for coronavirus and a swab for flu. And I was told that I had to self-isolate until the test results were in. And actually doing that in a strange country without knowing people was pretty awful. I was actually staying at a camping ground. I have a daughter in the Gold Coast, and my daughter has an account with the supermarket, like a delivery service. And she luckily rang up and got me some supplies delivered, but that would have been awkward to actually have arranged on myself. There was actually a restaurant on site where I was, and the owner of the restaurant was amazing. I actually, while it took several days for the food to actually come in, or 3 days, so I rang up the restaurant and I ordered food, and I told him I was in isolation, and he came and dropped the things off at my veranda. And I put my card on his ZipZap machine so that we were able to do it with, isolation. And I was luckily there with a Christian school, and the church and the school actually supported me. But I remember thinking, if I didn't have those contacts, it would be really awful and quite scary because of the situation that you were in. So that was sort of one thing. The whole getting home was another thing, and the stress of I had a flight originally booked for the 4th of April, but it became evident quickly that I needed to return earlier. I changed my flight to this coming Sunday, and within a few hours that flight was cancelled. I booked another flight for the Friday, and that got cancelled. I booked another flight for the Thursday, and that got cancelled. And then I rang Air New Zealand and said, look, this is my situation. I want to come home as soon as possible. And they ended up putting me on a flight from Brisbane rather than the Gold Coast. Basically, they had shut down all the, suspended all the flights from the smaller regions and were just flying out of the main area. And I kept looking at my phone the whole time, like every, sort of 30 minutes to check that the flight wasn't cancelled. The flight wasn't cancelled. And even up until the morning that I was leaving, it was just such a relief to get to the airport and know that the flight was going, because I was not keen at that point of, staying in Australia and how long you'd be stuck there for and not having the support that you needed. Um, so I did very much get a sense of the flight home was a bit worrying. and the getting in before lockdown, and the fact that you perhaps could have come in contact with something at the airport or on the planes. But now that I'm actually here, many of my worries have actually passed. I mean, like everybody, we have the fear of, are we going to get it, and is it going to affect us, or how is it going to affect us? But really, the chances of me having it are slim.
One of the issues has been, I suppose, shortages in the shops. So I think that is a mixture of people who have panic bought, but my sister works in a supermarket and she said it's not just that, it's people who would normally do a 1 week shop are now forced to kind of do a 2 to 3 week shop because they don't want to have to go out again, and obviously then the stock is limited for that reason as well. But I think the shops are starting to catch up a little bit. Thank you. So that's getting better. But no, so my husband's going out for the food at the moment, and he has to queue up outside, and then he's allowed to go in, and then they have to queue up quite far apart from each other, the two. So it all takes a lot longer than it would normally, and things like online orders aren't as easy to do now either. I guess the other thing for us as well is because I'm pregnant, my midwife appointments were cancelled and replaced with phone calls. But now they have started up again, but at a different hospital, and I have to go through all these checks before I go in. So they have to do temperature checks, do sanitizing, and things like that. So it's all a bit different and out of what was the normal routine. I keep thinking, like, a lot of people, they've had things like their weddings postponed, but I think, well, yeah, they've got the luxury, they can postpone it till next year. I can't really do a lot in my situation, so I just have to kind of deal with what we've got. And I guess it is a worry because although they're saying at the moment pregnant women aren't particularly at a higher risk, there's still a lot they don't know because it's a new virus. So we're taking precautions, but I think the hardest thing for me to deal with right now is that I'd planned for a home birth, but now all home birth services have been suspended. So that's a little bit of a tricky one because the birth I planned for, I'm having to think about alternatives. I'm going to have to go to hospital, which I didn't want to do, especially with the illness around so much right now. I feel like that's the last place I really want to be bringing a tiny baby. But I'm just going to have to do what I do, and I think it'll be easier once I've had the baby, because then we can just stay home and not worry about anything, and we won't have that lingering over us, like what if.
The biggest challenge for me is actually to manage the solitude and to create structure to my day. I'm not the best at that, the latter, at the best of times, and I find it quite challenging at this moment in time. The loneliness, in the beginning, actually, I thought, well, it's not that difficult. I'm used to be on my own. But of course, you're on your own. You go out, you participate in activities, you socialize, and all that has completely fallen away. And so it's very confronting, but it's also very interesting. So it always has two sides. What I did do, and for me it has really made a difference, and I did that after 2 weeks, I changed what I say to myself. So in the beginning I said, yes, I'm in solitary confinement, I'm in lockdown. And it creates also quite specific emotions. Now I say to myself, I've changed the story, and I say to myself, okay, I am cozily cocooning, and I'm going to transform into the most extraordinary, beautiful butterfly. And it creates it's a different story, but also creates very different feelings. And for me, it's a really good thing that I have changed the story. And I continue to do that. That's what, for me, that is what is happening. That is what I'm doing. And I'm doing this I'm doing this for the well-being of other human beings, for my own well-being, for well-being of the earth. And that's fine. So, and that helps me, that really helps me to cope with this situation. The other thing I also feel, is that, how to say this, there is a kind of, there's something being created. And I don't know yet what that is, but there's something being created at this moment in time. And I feel that in myself, and sometimes I think maybe it's something that I feel that is happening in the world, on the planet. There's something, in that way, yes, there is something cocooning. There's something becoming, whatever that is.
My personal circumstances are I've had limited mobility for a few years because I've needing knee replacements, and I've had one done. And my work is actually very demanding of me. I fly a lot. Most weeks, one or two flights, and probably 40 weeks a year, I'm actually away from home. This whole opportunity of restructuring my business for coronavirus has actually made me think that maybe it's time for my business to be restructured properly. Obviously, I will still need to go away because I work with whole school and whole schools around the country, but there is no reason why a lot of the seminars, the face-to-face seminars, can't be done on webinar. I've also had a sense for quite a long time that life for a lot of people is actually really, really busy. We're always kind of rushing here, rushing there, and I have a feeling that we're going to find new ways of doing things and find new ways of um, occupying ourselves and actually realizing that actually we quite like it. Um, so I'm hopeful that there's going to be a lot of silver linings. And I do look at the planet and think about how much less pollution there is because people aren't on the roads, because the planes aren't flying. And even in China, when we were looking at all the factories stopping, and they had pictures of the pollution um, with the factories operating and pictures of the pollution once it had stopped. Um, I think that it just shows you how much damage that we have been doing to the planet with our approach to life.
I was saying to my husband that you could usually work these full-time hours, and then by the time you get home, by the time we put dinner on and things like that, we don't have a lot of time for family time. And then trying to get our son to go to bed at a good time takes a long time as well. This is your picture.
Your family.
It's your family.
That picture. That's clever. You're a super mummy.
Yeah, it's our super family, isn't it?
Yeah, beautiful.
The good thing is that being at home means we're having so much more time together. We're having dinner at an earlier time. We're getting to do things together in the evening as well, and we're not feeling quite as worn out, not as burnt out, and getting better sleep because we can get up a little bit later for when we start work and things like that. So I'd say that's actually a really nice thing. I guess a lot of people are going on about the pressure of homeschooling at the moment, and I think that's quite overwhelming already, because when you're already working full time and then you're doing all the childcare, and not to mention if you do have other things going on, because actually we're moving house this week as well. So we're moving house and we're having a baby and we're working and we're all stuck in the house. Sometimes I think the pressure of homeschooling is too much, and you don't have to do all the curriculum stuff, all the stuff they would do at school. I think just having one-to-one time is enough, and letting them kind of decide what they want to do. They're still learning and experiencing new things. We're in completely unprecedented times, so now's the time to learn new things. But I found in the beginning I ordered all these resources, but Zach was completely overwhelmed. He wouldn't take part in them. He was just getting distressed about it, and my mum said to me, like, his normality has gone, his normal day-to-day has disappeared, he is overwhelmed. Stick with the old and the familiar, and don't keep showing him all these new shiny things, because he's not ready for it yet. And I thought, actually, that's a great point. I didn't really think of it from his point of view, but for him, he doesn't really understand what's happening in the world. He just knows suddenly everything's different. So
some positive things that have come out of that is I had started already before the lockdown the spoken word. It's my YouTube channel on which I share some thoughts or read a poem that I have written myself, or a poem of someone else, or something that I have written in a book that I think is a really interesting thought, and I share that via that YouTube channel. And yes, that is also in a way a way of communicating for me at the moment. So I communicate what I'm thinking, or what touches me in general, and it's a very nice thing to do, and I love it, and it allows me to express myself. And this is something which is important for me in general in life, that I need to express myself, and I'm practicing that. Not every day, but when I feel I need to say something or I want to share something, I do it. Of course, also the online connections with people, they have increased, which also has been interesting because some old friends contacted me, some people from primary school, secondary school, people I have not had contact with for years, and they just come into the picture. And again, that is actually very, very interesting. So I'm also enjoying that. In the beginning, I was quite reluctant to have actually, let's say via Skype or whatsoever, to have conversations, because when you have conversations in that way, it is a virtual conversation. It reminds you what it is like to have human contact, but it's not real human contact. And I was a little bit avoiding it because I thought maybe I will feel sad afterwards because I just realized what I'm missing. And it's actually my brother who broke through that, and he said, "Oh, let's Skype once." And in the beginning, I did have that feeling, but I'm getting used to it now, and it's okay. So I also enjoy it because I see people you like, friends, it's great. Another positive thing for me is actually, it's something I cherish already my whole life, but that has become more and more prominent now. It's silence. And I don't mean the silence around me, I mean the silence within. And I really feel I connect to that so much more. And it's so enriching. For me, silence is an enormous transformative force. And but with silence, I mean the deep, deep inner silence, the limitless silence, the universal silence. Ultimately, it's love. And to connect, to be with that very deeply, I think for me is an extraordinary bonus.